this great cartoon where the writer of a comic is like, the best part about comics is that there's no budget in comics. Like, if I say I want an entire fleet of spaceships exploding all at once above the Earth, like, there are no real limitations to that. And the artist is looking at him like, who the hell do you think you are, making me draw all that? But I feel like this takes advantage of a little bit of that, because this isn't Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison's first outing together. They have worked together a number of times. They really seem to have this little language between the two of them where they're able to convey information so well.
Hello and welcome to DTR Comics Podcast. I feel like I've done this the last 3 times just because it's my microphone and my laptop that we're doing it on, and so I've just become the owner. But why doesn't Dallas introduce this comic to us?
Today we're talking about a bit of a pet project of Grant Morrison and Frank White. I thought of that the second we picked this, and I was like, excellent. I'm going to make them groan. Today we're talking about WE3, the creator-owned book put out by Vertigo, the greatest comic publisher that no longer is, by the modern masters Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly. And I don't know if you can tell from my praise there, or the timbre of my voice, but I really like these creators a lot. And this was a bit of a blind spot for me that T pointed us towards, that I feel like was a joy to read. JP, do you want to talk a little bit about the premise?
I don't want to, but I will. So WE3, it's interesting. So the main cast in this comic is actually 3 kind of cyborg animals: a dog, a cat, and a bunny. I think they just go by 1, 2, and 3. I was so excited when I first saw, just kind of flipped through it a little bit. I'm like, ooh, animals. But it's animal cruelty, which is stupid. And I remember seeing this meme. It's like, am I going to hell? Nah, you'll be fine. What about this guy? He kicked a dog. Oh, there's a special place in the boiler room of hell for that guy. It's like that's how I felt about reading this. I'm like, I don't know. It's so good, but I hated reading it.
I think the whole point of it was that they were on your side about it. They were like, look at how evil the system is that takes something so pure and corrupts it for its own profit. Like, this book is very, very easily seen as a critique of the modern world. You know, like, the modern world has taken innocence of these animals. Like, the innocence of the world has basically become prostitute to capitalism and fascism, and that's what Grant Morrison is trying to say, I think. And so, yes, it's off-putting, but I think that's the point.
Yeah, and they definitely try to make it emotional. Like, at different points throughout the book, you see the lost and the lost posters for the people who lost these animals that are now humans or test subjects. They're not humans. Just like Lost Rabbit. And it's just like this little child who wrote this thing. And it's this kind of moment of just really sad, this is what could have been, but instead, opposite that, we got this giant black evil mastiff that wants to kill everything. And just kind of the exploitation is part of it, and that is what JP does not love.
On that note, why the heck did they have to go take somebody's pet? I mean, with all the animal cruelty going on, I mean, I understand that people do stupid stuff like animal experiments and whatnot, but they went out of the way to get somebody's pet that they love, have emotional ties to, instead of going to a pound or yard or something like that, which isn't much better, but you're at least not getting somebody's pet and destroying their lives. I don't know. Sorry, I'm emotional about this one.
I would be very sad if someone came and stole my cat.
What the heck?
I love that little jackass. She's my favorite. I hate her, but I love her. She, honestly, reading this story and reading the personality of the cat, I was like, they nailed it. Because this morning, I was literally woke up by my cat doing a river dance on me at 4 a.m. because she found her toy mouse, and she was like, and I was like, okay, perfect. Thank you for this activity. So, good personalities.
So those are the 3 main characters. The dog, they call him number 1, the cat, they call him number 2, and the bunny, who's number 3. The dog is very much a dog. He asks quite often if he's a good boy and wants to know.
He is such a good boy.
He is a good boy, and he like wants to do good, and so it's like you can see him. JP, can you hold this? Actually, you can see him like talking and being like asking people how they're doing and asking if he's been a good boy and like trying to understand how to help people. The cat, on the other hand, can you turn the page? On the next one is me, and it's the top panel there, where the first thing he says is just stink boss, and is like talking to these like big politicians and just like insulting them, and they're like, well, we didn't ever teach him any manners, sorry about that. And it's just like, yep, that's a cat. And then the rabbit's just like, can I have food?
I like that they didn't like intelligence up the animals, if that makes sense. Like they gave them the capacity to speak, but I was a little bit like, oh man, is this gonna be like some Disney Channel original where like these lost animals are like, we've got to find our way home, which is exactly what it was. But like they still talked like animals, you know, and I thought that was a neat detail.
Like it would be that, except that it's rated R. It's like a rated R action flick, Disney original, sci-fi. Lots of things. So pretty much these animals get used for animal testing to become weapons. Like you see them early on, they assassinate this political leader that is against kind of like the free world, and you're like, whoa, they're really, really useful. But then this politician comes, I think he's going to be a senator, or he is a senator, and he's like, okay, these animals are a mess, but I really like the program, so we're going to decommission these animals and just rebuild it all nice. He's like telling the people to like clean yourself up for the media and know that when people see the terrible things we've done to these animals, we aren't going to love it. So we're going to try and make this seem like it has a good image. But then the lady who started the whole program and trained them and cared for these animals doesn't like that. And so she lets them go. And it's really cool. First off, the scene is really cool. And you want to tell us about this, JP, while I show it?
Yeah, so I had to go back and like go through these panels multiple times to kind of get what's going on. So I think it takes it from several different angles, either from security footage, from the animals, but it's like 3 or 4 separate pages of, is it like 18 panels per page, with very little dialogue, just kind of showing how this escape goes about, how do they mention her name, the scientist? I don't think so, but like how she releases them and then they get out and basically have their escape. And then the very end of it is the coolest 2-page panel of them just being free, and it's just beautiful. You can see like them with the armor and like the machines, but like with the background of the night sky, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and that's where the book ended for JP. Was right there. That was the whole story. It's like the episode of Friends where they didn't let Phoebe watch the sad endings of any movies as a kid. So she thought like Old Yeller was a happy movie, and they're like, no, it's not. And she's like, yeah, he just gets to play with that boy, and that's the end of the movie. So they sit her down and they make her watch the end of like all these horrible children's movies. And so she's like, as an adult woman, she's like sobbing when Old Yeller goes crazy and dies. It's a little bit how the rest of this book felt, I imagine, for JP.
Well, I really liked it, honestly, because I feel like this comic has got so much soul for a very simple premise, where it's like, let's just tell a story about some bionic animals and let's make it an action thing. But you can tell that the creators really liked this and just wanted it to be entertaining. So it's big. There are military attack helicopters that get taken down by a cat, like shooting little spines through the pilots, and it's just all over the place and wild and bombastic, and I love it.
I wish, honestly, I might try and find it for the thumbnail, but there's this great cartoon where the writer of a comic is like, the best part about comics is that there's no budget in comics. Like, if I say I want an entire fleet of spaceships exploding all at once above the Earth, like, there are no real limitations to that, and the artist is looking at him like, who the hell do you think you are, making me draw all that? But I feel like this takes advantage of a little bit of that, because this isn't Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison's first outing together. They have worked together a number of times. They really seem to have this little language between the two of them where they're able to convey information so well. And so we really do get to see, like, all right, what if an action movie had the budget to blow up like 70 Apache helicopters, you know? But somehow they still keep it somewhat grounded because of the gritty action bits, how the story is told itself. You don't lose track of the stakes, even though there is no action budget. There's no explosion budget, really. And I think that's pretty neat, and that's something that you really can only do with comics, and you can only do well with a team that works this well together.
Yeah, I don't know. With the action, I also really like how they divide it up into like big action pieces when it comes to the art, and also lots of little pieces of action that you can see a bunch of different stuff going on at the same time. And it makes sense with like these robot like armor that they have. Like they've got missiles going off everywhere. They've got all these different Apache helicopters coming after them, and so like there's so much going on. And so I think it's a really cool way to display that in like several different areas, but also keep it kind of focused on one big action that's going on.
Yeah, they really do a good job of switching between like the big moments and the small moments. I don't know that I have read another comic with better action than this. And I'm really curious to hear if that's the same with you guys, because like a lot of action is kind of like they have kind of short moments, but this does a really good job of kind of like sitting in it and letting you see everything and take it in.
I feel like the only comic that I have seen that's comparable in its action storytelling would be Headlopper, which is coming out right now, which clearly takes its influence from Frank Quitely's work. Like, if you look at comics concurrent with what Frank Quitely was doing, it's not a contest. He is doing something new. It's like when Jack Kirby came on the scene and was like, all right, we're going to make dynamic poses, and we're actually going to make these comics feel like they're moving. Frank Quitely came in and he was like, okay, I'm going to take that to the 10th degree. And everybody around him was like, okay, we either have to adapt and get better, or we're going to get left in the dust. And so I see things now that only exist because of this, you know? And what's really simple in the Headlopper comics is basically any given comic would give you two images. They'd say, like, here's the guy rushing in with a sword, and then they do a second panel, and it's like, here's the thing headless and the guy on the other side. And you, as an astute reader, fill in that blank, and you're like, okay, he chopped off the head. What Headlopper does is it adds 1 to 2 more panels in the middle of that, showing the action happening. And what it does is it really, like, it clarifies the choreography. It makes the action part of the story rather than just something that happens in the story. And that is basically what Frank Quitely is pioneering here with images like this, where he puts the big splash page on the back. Like, he has these huge images that convey scope, they convey, I'm just going to say scope again, but like the size of the action. But then he breaks it down with dozens of little panels zooming in on the minutia and the details of the action scene. It's almost like in an action movie when like the car flips and then it goes in slow motion, you see like everything floating around it, and you're like, oh man, this is a big deal. But he does that on every page. He says, I'm not going to slow down. I can't slow down time, but I can slow you down as a reader. And I can make you look at all these little bits of carnage that are going on in these big action scenes. And again, I don't think that they would be as good with just those little panels, and I don't think they'd be just as good with only the big panels. It's the combination and the juxtaposition that I think really lends itself to the action that T's talking about.
Yeah, I think that is probably the best I've seen in action, at least in this comic here. I've definitely have a lot less experience in reading, especially action comics, but I don't know. I was really impressed by that. And I'm just going to reiterate again, like, this is a great comic. Like, it's very well done, but I still disliked it because of the ethics of it.
I just want to talk about one last thing here about we can talk about the ethics in a minute, but just those middle panels there, I just love seeing the cat so focused and intent, because it's like there's so much energy in a panel where nothing is going on, just because you know what's coming, and you see that person gets killed from way far away in a helicopter. But just the fact that in such a static image, there's so many stakes, and it's really cool. I just don't see that very often at all.
On the page directly next to it is a much quieter page, but I think there's the same level of craft going on. Something that Frank Quietly does really well that I wish more people did is he always puts the point of focus in the middle of the panel, no matter what's going on. Like, your eye doesn't have to wander. You don't have to wonder what you're supposed to be doing. So on this page right here, we see the initial speaker, and he's right in the middle of his panel. We go down, we see the listener, and then she never strays from the middle of the panel. It zooms in on her expression and her reaction to what's going on before the final page serves as a transition to the next scene, again being in the center of the page. And it's like, Frank Quietly does so much work, so you have to do so little work to read his comics. And it's really special. It makes these things flow. He is a master of saying, this is going to be a fast moment and this is going to be a slow moment. And we've talked about that before on the podcast, where like we've had to go back and force ourselves to go slow to observe things. Frank Quietly doesn't give you that option. He says, no. You're going to take a long time to look at this without any words. Or, this is a moment that I want you to see. I want it to feel like the rushing train at the bottom of the page while you're reading this. And that comes from something as simple as where he places the images in the panels.
Yeah. So before JP gets really moral on us, I just want to say this comic is cool. And it just has like a lot of cool moments. Like when they send this Mastiff after the three of them, which is supposed to be like the bigger, scarier version of them. And it's really cool just to see them like stand up to it and like just stare it in the face. And there's this one moment where the dog is facing up to the Mastiff after the poor rabbit has had it rough, and somebody's like, where's the cat? And you just switch back to the scientist, and he's like, the lady who trained these animals was very gifted. She taught them to work as a team. And then like in that moment, like the cat like breaks out of a wall and grabs the dog, and then like the two of them take it down, and you like almost get chills just from like the buildup of the moment. It's so well done, especially the moment that the cat shows up. I will show this and then we can move on.
Isn't that gorgeous? Also, that's just so cat-like. I love how like I think we already talked about it, but like I love how they made the animals like still animals. Like the dog totally acts like a dog. The cat is totally a cat, and even the bunny's like just chill bunny. But yeah, I don't know. That scene was really cool. Kind of seeing them work together and taking down the big old bad Mastiff, which, he probably was a good boy too before he was cruelly treated and experimented on. But that's, sorry, more of my ethic stuff.
This is it. I'm done talking about how I'm like, this is just freaking badass.
It is. Okay, so like I said, it was really cool. I loved like the art, the way it was all kind of set up for you, but like it was hard to really enjoy it for me personally because of like those negative feelings I was having the whole time, which I think was, like you're saying, the purpose of it. It's like we're meant to feel like disgusted by the way that these animals were treated and just like how inhuman it is. Man, I feel like it just says so much more about like the people that would do this kind of thing than it does to like the animals. It was never their choice.
Have you ever felt this way about just like a classic action movie? When Chris Hemsworth has been blowing stuff up and killing people, was it as off-putting as it is with these three innocent animals doing it?
I'm not so sure, because as sad as it is, it's like I kind of expect that kind of crap from like humans, but like to like force an animal, like to force that dog that just wants to be a good boy and that cat and the bunny, to force them to be like weapons of mass destruction, like, yeah, that hit home even worse than like seeing a big old evil Thanos or something like that, like destroying the world.
I feel like we kind of have lower expectations for humans than we do for animals.
Which is sad, but
And I honestly feel like that's some of the genius of this story. Like, when you read more of Grant Morrison's work, you realize he thinks violence is ugly. He thinks fascism is ugly. He thinks capitalism is ugly. And what better way to make us think all that is ugly than to let us watch these cute, cuddly animals be taken advantage of by that system. You know, because the reality is, like, I've seen a million action movies, and they're always fun. They're always cool. There's, like, lots of fun explosions. But yet reading WE3, you're like, oh, man, like, how dare this system exist that takes the purity away from these animals, that, like, keeps them from being sweet, keeps them from being kind. And it really, it forces you to internalize, like, oh, how ugly of a system that just this exists in any capacity, you know?
I was just going to say, like, yeah, the feeling it had is like this purity, this innocence is just robbed and like replaced with murder and violence, and just, it's just disgusting.
Yeah, but it does have the flip side of that. Like, one of the things is, like, you have these people who are like, we want to get rid of these animals because if people found out, they'd recognize how wrong this is. And that's kind of the story, is that people do find out, and some of the scientists are like, this can't go on, and so they let it out, and people actually are outraged at it. And so it does have a good job of being like, there are good people and they can make a difference, and there are bad people and they can make a difference, and you really do see both almost kind of fighting over the future of these three animals.
I think one of the tools that Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison use to give us that icky feeling, like, because I think this could have been way more exciting, bombastic fun. You know, if, like, the animals were like, oh man, we're kicking the butt of bad guys, I don't think we'd have the qualms that we do. But the fact that, like, things are kind of ugly here, you know, like, we see the tech that allows the animals to talk, like, screwed down into their head, and we see, like, the wounds around them, we see their bloodshot eyes. When there's action, we see bullets piercing body parts. We see, like, very visceral carnage, and, like, it prevents it from being fun and exciting. Like, it's badass, like T said, but, like, it's off-putting as well. It doesn't have any of the comic booky, oh, they're gonna tear this person, Doctor Doom's going to tear Thanos' spine out, but there isn't going to be any blood. It's going to be all neat and fun. You know, it's like, no, this cat's going to saw somebody in half.
Yeah, and they have some very intentionally ugly moments. Like, I don't think I'm going to show this one, but they're about to get run over by a train, and so the rabbit blows up the train to save them all. And then the dog goes and swims in the wreckage and pulls this man out, drags him ashore, and he's unconscious. But the dog's like, good dog, help man, good dog. But then they have to leave, and it shows you that the guy basically doesn't have a bottom half. He's very dead. And so it's kind of like they are capable of this violence, but don't quite understand the repercussions of their actions. And I feel like we've talked about that before with the Vision Family episode, where it was kind of like violence is something that, like, happens, but you have to, like, understand it, and it can be really dangerous for the people that don't, if you try and kind of weaponize them. Doesn't go well.
I feel like the story had some pretty serious Iron Giant vibes for me, which I think is one of the greatest stories ever told, in all honesty. It's something that my wife isn't a huge fan of animation, but I've basically been like, you have to watch this one. Like, there are no choices. I'm watching Glee with you. You have to watch The Iron Giant with me. And that's the premise of that whole movie. Like, if a gun knew that it was a gun, would it want to be a gun? You know? And the answer that the Iron Giant and WE3 have is no, that's not what it wants. Like, destruction isn't something that these weapons want to be a part of. And I felt really emotional at the end of WE3 when we see the animals, like, free themselves from this system, right? And I thought there was a really, I read it all just sitting in, like, over the course of 30, 40 minutes, you know? And so I saw the first page is a newspaper glorifying the violent actions of the animals. And then the last pages are the immediate juxtaposition of that, showing the taking apart of what occurred there. You know, so we have a newspaper that's like, oh, so cool, guerrilla leader killed in raid. And then we have the exact same setup with someone opening up the newspaper for the day that's like, science testimony sinks senator's campaign. So, like, the system can be beat. People can free themselves from this if they so choose. And I think one of the most emotional moments for me is when the cat and the dog are sitting in the basement taking off their armor, and they're like, we aren't this. This isn't... The dog's like, I'm Bandit. Like, I'm a dog. I'm not a weapon. And that's a really cool story beat. That's a really cool thing to come to as a conclusion for this story that grounds it a little bit more than, say, just a classic action movie.
Did we ever talk about how it does a really cool job of showing the view from the animals?
No. In the back of this, it talks a little bit about the author's conception of some of these panels, because they're totally different. Like, they kind of set up the page almost like a 3D scene, and you get to see the panels from a different perspective. Let's go back and find the best example of that real quick. But when I was reading all the information in the back, because I was interested in it, they mentioned how they intentionally... Dallas, can you find that page? I can't find it. They intentionally made this comic to feel different through time, because they said animals experience time different, and the way that they have instincts and things just totally is a different experience than how we do. And they mention it earlier in the comic where somebody says, I don't think people understand what we've made here. Like, they can almost see into the future just with their instincts. And so they created these panels to kind of show that we see these blips and the cat can just move through them because he's fast and he can see things that we totally can't. And it's a really cool concept that they like took an abstract thing like that and put it into the craft. It's really cool.
Well, I was going to say, with this page, it's also just cool conceptually from the comics creating standpoint. Like, it lends itself to the story. You know, it's not just there to be cool, but it's almost like Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison are saying, like, what if we turned a comic book on its side? You know, like, this is what it would look like if we weren't looking at it from straight on. These are 3D characters. This is a very real world that we're observing, and when we don't see it from the front, we can see them like popping out of their panels, and it makes everything else seem a lot more visceral.
Another really good example of this is right here. This is one of the first moments where you get this 3D moment, and you're kind of like, whoa. This is a shot that could not be captured or created in any other way. Like, The Matrix almost has something like this, but not quite, where you're like in the middle of the bullets, seeing it happen, frozen in time, but there's still so much going on. And it's just interesting how they were able to kind of convey time differently than we can conceptualize it. It's just a really cool creation thing that I'm impressed with.
Yeah, along with that, I don't know, I thought it was really cool because as much as I love dogs and cats and stuff, like, I still don't understand quite what it's like to be them. But so I like this because it kind of gave you the chance to practice empathy and kind of see things from their perspective. And even though you can't quite fully understand it, it helps you realize that you don't fully understand it, but it helps you like try a little bit harder to see things from their perspective, to kind of feel how they would feel. And so I really like that, because empathy is actually something that's really important to me. Like, I try to put myself in other people's shoes, and I thought like the way that they portrayed that in this comic was like, I don't know, I thought it was really cool. And I think it's something that would help a lot of us out in our own lives.
One of the ways that they do that is they're so good at also, it's fun because like the more you dive into this, the more you realize cool things. Like, they have a really good show, don't tell mentality in this comic. Like, when it's talking about Dr. Barry, the woman who put all these things together, they'll have these really brief moments where she's looking for her keys, and she walks into a room, and you can see that there's an empty hospital bed, and she starts tearing up. And that's all it gives you. And then she looks for her keys in that room and moves on. And I just love stories that put things in there And Dallas points out that I didn't look at the art well enough, and there's a photo of her dad, and he's obviously not there. Okay. I could pull things into this. But it's like you do have to make inferences there, and it's still show don't tell, which I love.
I think what I love the most about this comic is that it's told in only a way that a comic book can, if that makes sense. I feel like it's almost a bit of a lost art what Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely do, where they loved comics enough that they told stories only comics could tell. Like, this isn't an IP farm. They didn't just put together a story really quick, make it look cool enough that Netflix would pick it up and make a show out of it, you know? They sat down and they're like, all right, how is the comic book medium going to tell this story in a way that nothing else can? And it's shots like the 20 panels laid over the top of a one action scene. It's shots like all those bullets exiting out of the back of the bad guy. It's the panels being flipped on the side to show the cat somersaulting through them. And it's just right here, even in the more quiet moments back there at the front with Dr. Barry going through her house. There's a panel that is literally structured to be a little 3D rendition of her room. So it's not just square panel borders. They've angled it out so we can see a 3D little bedroom. Like, they didn't have to do that. That doesn't lend itself anymore to a story other than saying, like, look what this craft can do. Look at how cool we can make this page look at any given moment. And I think that that's so special. Or even right here, T's flipping through, there's a whole thing where the panel is the 3D look into the vehicle. And it's honestly just a flex at this point. Like, it's not even storytelling anymore. It's just Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison being like, we are the greatest that have ever done this.
And that's kind of my thought. Like, I love these, and I'm like, how would you get these into more comics? But it's tough. It's even tough to, like, understand something well enough to be like, what if I break all the rules, but still have it make sense? And so it's really cool to see people at the top of their game who are even able to do that.
And I also love, just speaking to them as a pair, we can... I've never read this, but I've read things from before this and from after this, and you can see elements and things that they learned from WE3 introduced into some of their later work and even improved upon. Like, one of my favorite comics by them is called Pax Americana. It's just a little one-shot that, honestly, Grant Morrison holds up his middle finger to Watchmen and is like, yeah, it is stupid. And this is why. And you're like, oh, I think you're right. I think it is stupid. And he's like, yeah, because I just did it better. And so much of the storytelling that goes on there, I now see was conceptualized in WE3 and then polished for Pax Americana.
That's really interesting. And I've totally spaced on what I was going to say. I think one of the reasons that I actually do like this comic is it's not the kind of thing that I usually enjoy, which is like 80% action, 20% middle finger to the system. And this is weird, but it's kind of like, I like action well enough, and I'm like okay with questioning authority, but I'm not the biggest on it. And so it's like things that I wouldn't really enjoy done so well that I get to enjoy it. And that makes me happy because it's kind of like, I like seeing things that have a different perspective. I like seeing things that make me like not even think about the things that I would think about. Like, this is just totally new stuff that is just cool to see and makes you think in a different way. And so that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it, is because it was way different. I can't think of another comic book like this.
Man.
Like, seriously, if you had to be like sci-fi, animals, corrupt government, science, super action blockbuster, like nothing else is like that.
So when I first got into comics, I remember seeing my first Frank Quitely piece, and I thought it was so ugly. I was like, look at how lumpy and weird these people are. Why does everybody look like they're made of oatmeal? I hate this. This is no good. And now he's probably my favorite artist, in all honesty. Like,
But you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. These some ugly folks.
So I guess I wanted to hear your thoughts on the very distinct, ugly aesthetic of Frank Quitely's world. Like, what do you think about these oatmeal people?
it was interesting because I remember like the bad guy, the bad doctor, like so many times it does like a close up on his teeth and it just looks so ugly and nasty. And I think that kind of lended to just portraying him as the bad guy. But he's still like, even though it's got that art that makes some things look really ugly, at the same time, he can make other things look just beautiful. And so, I don't know. It's cool because you can kind of see that contrast throughout the comic as well.
You've read All-Star Superman, right, JP?
I got busy. I don't remember. I think that was like right before I left for the summer to do sales, and so I didn't get to finish that one. But yeah.
So that's the same team that did this. That's a book so nice, I bought it twice. And whenever there's a book so nice, I bought it twice, JP gets it.
I get it sometimes too, but it's usually depends on what it is. But I feel like a good example of this is like you have those ugly moments, but you also have like, here's the wanted poster for the missing cat, which is the one we haven't shown you yet. And it's so cute and he looks so happy and just, it's so serene. And so it's interesting how it's like, you know that it's a conscious choice to make these ugly people, but it really serves the story and the world building. Like, this is gritty, but it doesn't have that like way overdone gritty feel.
Yeah, it's not like Snyder cut gritty.
Or yeah, it's not just like, let's get it super noir and dark and have nothing in there. It's kind of like gritty because it's just like, this is a lot of times not fun to look at, but I keep looking. So it's really interesting how well the art style serves the story. Anyways, I feel like we're kind of running out of things to say. Do we want to talk about the ratings, or do you want to talk about something else?
I have one thing. What do you think of the animal speak that Grant Morrison does? It's like he doesn't speak in colloquial English throughout the majority of this. Do you feel like that interrupted your experience with the comic? Do you feel like it lent itself? I feel like my personal experience, I initially had a bit of a hard time understanding the animals, like the first couple pages, and then I almost like picked up their dialect. And I thought it was endearing. I thought it was a cool detail, but I just want to hear like your thoughts about dialogue in this book.
Do you want to go first, JP, or should I?
Sure.
When I first started reading it, I was like, these animals don't make much sense. I'm just thinking of like, oh, brother, art thou? That don't make no sense. But then as I've read it the second time, I really do enjoy it because it really is not human language, which makes sense. And you really get to see the animals and their personality through the way that they speak. And I do like it. You do have to slow down, and you do have to understand that it's totally different, but I do like it. But it's also kept me from we could read what the animals say here, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, the rabbit's like, see, tail, bad, fix, now. And the dog's like, no fix, 3 calm. And then the cat says, 2 where? And it's like very broken up and weird. And so I'm like, I'm not going to put you guys through reading through this and trying to translate what I'm saying, what the animals are saying, and have the visuals. But I like it.
Yeah, I liked the way, like, it was also it was difficult for me at first. And I think it's meant to be because dogs and cats and rabbits, they don't communicate with words. They communicate, I don't know, I feel like mostly with feeling and like their actions. And so that's why the visuals lend themselves so much more to what they're actually saying. And they do like give you ideas with like the broken up dialogue. But again, I think it's also broken up to kind of remind you that, yeah, dogs and cats and bunnies don't speak with words. And so it's meant to be kind of more visual to figure out what they're saying or communicating.
Have you guys seen those videos of the dogs speaking? Because they give them buttons, and then they can press the buttons that they want. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's funny how like this is actually turned out to be science accurate. Anyway.
All right, little lightning round here. Favorite details. I think that the rats with like techno heads and like one of them has a drill head, one of them has like a screwdriver head. Some guy like hodgepodges rats together. that is some cool sci-fi right there. The fact that the bunny poops out bombs, I didn't catch that till the very end when it like showed the little bomb coming out of the bunny butthole, and I was like, I had bunnies for a couple days. That is true. That is bombs. Also, bunnies have orange pee. Fun fact. Found that out when I came in and thought Fanta was on my bed. Nope, bunny pee. Third, I love the panel breakdowns. Again, I've said that a million times, but we were just flipping through another page, and they used the silhouette of the train tracks to break up the action to show a fight between the cat and the dog. Mwah, masterful. And when the two hillbillies show up and they think the bunny is an alien, gave me mad Back to the Future #1 vibes, and I love that. Honey, get the shotgun! Or like Monsters Inc. when they're like, Gator!
There's a gator in the house. Give me that shovel.
Very much those same vibes, and I enjoyed it.
I don't know that I have as much of a lightning round of things that I really loved, but I just thought it was so well done, so consistent, so cool, and yeah, love it.
Yeah, so I think the one for me was probably the 2-page panel where the story should have ended, where they escaped. That was definitely my favorite.
She's like, I like it when the animals are happy and nothing else.
No, yeah, like when you gave it to me for the first time and I was just flipping through it, I like saw that panel and I'm like, ooh, it's so pretty. I like it. I'm going to like this. And that's where it should have ended.
Well, if we have to rate it, what rating are we going to give it? I can go first. I was the one that picked this book. I read it a little while ago because this boy here got it for me for Christmas. The Mr. Santa Claus himself. Like, that's what Dallas really is. And I really enjoy it. It's weird after singing this much praise. I feel like I'm going to give it a 7.5. Just because it's just fun. It's not life-changing, but I really like it because I feel like it shows what comics can do. And it shows what comics can do differently because a lot of times they kind of follow the same trends. And this is like, forget your trends. I'm going to do whatever I want. And it turned out really well.
Like I said, I think it's masterfully done. It's beautiful, but also ugly in a great way. But like, just, I don't know. I let my personal biases in, like, they totally take control of my ratings. And so, like, just because, like, the animal cruelty, like, I understand that it's meant to make me feel that way, but I don't like feeling that way. And so, I don't know. I have to give it, like, a 6.8. Like, it was great, but, oh, man.
I'm just reminded of the Tyler, the Creator song where he's like, I freaking hate you, but I love you.
It honestly reminds me of when me and my wife went to see Uncut Gems. We both, like, the whole point of that movie is to like put you on edge and like make you feel like the main character the whole time, and like that's not a good feeling to be tense for like 2.5 hours. Me and her left and we were like, we hated that. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, how cool that they were able to do that. And she's like, you shut up, we didn't like it. And I was like, no, really, it was a masterful thing. She's like, shut up, no, we didn't like it. And like, rating art is inherently subjective. Like, there is no objectivity to this. So like, you're not letting your biases take over your rating. You're just assessing art. I think the craft in this is like 9.8 out of 10, but I honestly will probably give it like a 7.8 out of 10, just because like I thought the themes were great. I thought that the craft was phenomenal. I've really enjoyed talking about it for the last 45 minutes, but I don't feel like it had the staying power. I don't feel like it had the oomph that like makes a 10 for me. I almost feel like something can have this demonstrates for me that something can have perfect craft but not speak to me, and that'll get it to like an 8. And to get to like a 9 or a 10, it's got to speak to me on a little bit deeper level. So that's where I sit at with it.
Yeah, it's kind of like it almost needs to have cultural significance or life-changing significance if we're going to let it out of the up past the 8 range, which I feel like is fair, and I'm glad that we do that. But this has been DTR Comics Podcast with T, JP, and Dallas. And we will see you next week where we will talk about some new little bit of comic world, and you can learn more about it. And we'll see you then.
Take care.